Welcome to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast from wealthmanagement.com focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. I'm Diana Britton, managing editor of wealthmanagement.com, and in this podcast we explore some of the struggles and personal development issues facing advisors and financial services professionals, and how to get to a place of healing for mind, body, and spirit. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Healthy Advisor podcast, and thanks for joining us. As you may know, this is the podcast focused on financial advisor health and well-being, and today's guest certainly has a story to tell. His name is John Connell. He's the co-founder and CEO of Focal, an AI meeting management solution for financial advisors. John, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Diana. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. I don't know if excited is the right word, but John has been a guest on my colleague Shannon Rossick's Wealth Stack podcast, where he talks in detail about Focal's mission and the transformative power of agentic AI in the financial advisory space. You should definitely check out that episode. But John's life path, might not be what it is today without one particular experience that happened to him as a young man. John calls it an origination point for him, a kind of a wake-up call that forever changed the trajectory of his life. And we're going to talk about that today. The summer after his freshman year in high school, John went on the Texas Giant roller coaster in Arlington, Texas, which apparently was the tallest wooden roller coaster in the U.S. at the time. And needless to say, John ended up in the hospital with injuries that the doctors weren't sure he'd recover from. And thankfully, John's here today, obviously, and he came out of that experience, but he came out of it with a renewed appreciation for life, for time, and a hunger for exploration, for seeing the world and making the world a better place. So we're going to talk about how that experience shaped John's life and his career. But John, I kind of wanted to go back, even further and, tell me what your childhood was like. I know you grew up in Texas, and what were some of the early experiences that shaped you?
Absolutely. My childhood was incredible. My little brother is my best friend. My parents still live in Texas today. Having a brother to challenge me and frequently outperform me, frankly speaking, was fuel. I oftentimes joke that he's the better, faster, stronger version of myself. And as a kid, I was very much a friend of the world. So I would say that I was fortunate to have competitive team sports, including baseball, drumline performances to hone that competitive spirit. There was always something going on in my life, and this theme of staying busy in internally expecting excellence was systematically drilled into who I am today. I've been the type of person who always gives 100% across these activities, across school, across work. Have a high internal drive composed of what I refer to as sheer grit, determination, resilience. And some of that likely comes from growing up around astronauts' kids and working at NASA as a tour guide in high school. There's definitely something to that mindset that believes that failure is not an option. Now, to your question around experiences that have shaped me, back in high school, I had a near-death experience that shaped who I am today after a roller coaster accident where the doctor told me, I'm in critical condition. My body was starting to shut down. Coming off of that experience in particular, I developed, as you'd mentioned, a newfound perspective on life, really an appreciation for what that I had and a desire to pay it forward, along with the belief that I was responsible to really make the most of the life that I had.
Yeah. So I wonder if you would take us back to that day when you got on the roller coaster and, kind of what happened. What was the, kind of immediate aftermath? Because I know you didn't go to the hospital right away, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, it was a slow play, really. I just remember the roller coaster ride itself being probably one of the most excruciatingly painful experiences I think I have ever had. And this is coming from somebody who's had a wealth of injuries, for better or for worse. I've broken fingers. I've had, some serious injuries over the years. But this one in particular, I recall vividly the duration of the ride after that first drop when I slammed my stomach into the handlebar of the Texas Giant. The rest of the roller coaster, like I could tell you the specific twists and turns of that
Mm,
entirety of the experience. And I remember getting off, and the pain starts to subside, and becoming just ravenously hungry, and had chowed
mm.
down on a couple of orders of chicken tenders and a foot long corn dog, and I think I had some funnel cake, and of course, couldn't keep all that down later that night. But it was a couple days later on Mother's Day, and I was just totally out of it. I couldn't keep food nor water in my system. Everything was coming up, and we finally went to the doctor to navigate what was happening. And long story short, it was a 2 week process of being in the hospital, whereby they had poked me with the IV. They've ran a bunch of tests. They sort of pulled the whole 9 yards on trying to identify what the problem was. But ultimately came out of it the other side after thinking, I'm a goner. This is it. With that newfound appreciation, really, it was quite entertaining. They they weren't sure when I first went in what the problem would be. They thought maybe it's appendix perhaps had burst. They ran some tests, some scans. They almost went for exploratory surgery at one point,
Oh,
and I
wow.
ended up avoiding surgery. The diagnosis there being that I had injured a specific segment of my small intestine near the head of the pancreas that had led to a multitude of these complications, causing not only internal swelling from blunt trauma, but organ dysfunction, making my body not function properly, something similar to what you'd see reported by bull riders. But very grateful to be on the other side of that one.
Yeah, I mean, same here. So I know that, initially, the doctors didn't know if you'd make it, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of had to come to terms with the fact that you may not live. And I mean, I guess I'm wondering what was going through your head that night when you weren't sure what was going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When I was laying there, I remember thinking, I've lived an incredible life. I've had amazing people that have surrounded me, family, friends, teachers, mentors. And when you're a kid, and you hear these things from the doctor, and you're in critical condition, right? You certainly think through the worst case scenarios. And while I was mostly out of it, I remember thinking, I'm not giving up, and ultimately felt just incredibly grateful when I did have enough conscious presence to realize, hey, I am recovering. I am going to make it to the other side of this. That was the catalyst moment for me, or the origination point, really, for who I am today. And I just remember it being an incredibly revealing experience on really that newfound perspective of how do you then make the most of a life that you have to live, when you thought, well, maybe you didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah. I was reading a study from 2014 that was published in the National Library of Medicine, and how about the effects of near death experiences, and some of the effects that they found: long term depression, broken relationships, disrupted career, feelings of severe alienation, inability to function in the world, long years of struggling with a keen sense of altered reality. But some of the positive effects, strengthened belief in life after death, feeling specially favored by God, a new sense of purpose or mission, heightened self esteem, increased compassion and love for others, lessened concern for material gain, recognition, or status, greater desire to serve others, increased ability to express feelings, greater appreciation of and zest for life, increased focus on the present, deeper religious faith or heightened spirituality, search for knowledge, greater appreciation for nature. I mean, the list goes on, but it sounds like a lot of the things that you're talking about here, right? And how that impacted your life on the positive side. I don't know. I guess how did that experience shape the path for the rest of your life, and where did you go from there after that experience?
Yeah. For me, it definitely awakened a deep-seated sense of appreciation and obligation to make something of the life that I lived. It represented an opportunity to keep going when I'd been told that the race would get short. And ever since then, I have known that I need to make an impact on this world. And finding mechanisms to scale impact and achieve excellence in what I do have been priority principles to live by. And with that, living with intention therefore became a daily priority, actively seeking out paths that would allow for me to harness my talents to affect meaningful, lasting change in the world. The urgency and the clarity that emerged from that experience continue to shape the way that I make decisions today, pushing me towards bold actions, not just to succeed, but to create waves of positive influence that can ripple outward into the world. For example, back in college, I remember going into college, eyes wide open, trying to do every student organization and just keeping myself as involved as possible in student life. I had found case competitions and these stock pitch competitions, which, fun enough, paid for a fair portion of my tuition, and that's a different story, as sort of this outlet for making the most of life. The learning experiences there were paramount. And sure, the classroom was great, but nothing beats real life experience. And I remember really helping a student organization at the time getting off the ground with a few friends. We called it the University Securities Investment Team, or USIT, which now has an active base of thousands of alumni and current students across higher education institutions, including the University of Texas. But I would argue that this mindset, whether you want to call it the growth mindset or the make most of life mindset, it extends professionally as well and to an identity level. And I
Mm.
see on a personal level, technology and the world of finance have been conduits to really scale that impact in the world.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you mentioned that to me as well, that technology was kind of a conduit for making the world a better place and for carrying out this passion. And I didn't really see it at first. So explain how it's a conduit for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you look across any major societal shift, and technology has always been the focal point for impact. Pun intended there with focal point, right? Whether we're talking about warfare and evaluating the introduction of the bow, the radar, the bomb, or if you're considering migration from the horse and carriage to car and airplane, or in recent times, right, the advent of productive social change brought about by the mobile phone, the internet, now AI, technology has been the mechanism to scale impact. And when I look at the age of AI and software as a service right now, we are at a point of liftoff for automation. And being at the forefront of transformational innovation evolution, it's both inspiring and it's fulfilling. And for me, it's been the perfect intersection of past experience, where I think the world is moving, and really that ability to make your mark on society.
Mm, yeah. So where did life take you after the accident? How did you get into, the technology world?
Yeah, yeah. I've since that accident been a discoverist at heart. When I look at whether it's the sort of backlog of student organizations that I tapped into in college, or life abroad as a student, but also in the real world during my time at Microsoft, I had some experience in big tech where I was able to have quite a lot of responsibility at a very young age, including managing $1 billion P&L for the O365 business on the academic side and helping support the LinkedIn acquisition. But then also, just on a personal note, I had previously always been passionate around innovation and technology, and how it is that you can make the world a better place. And feeling, as if at a big organization, while yes, it was a great grounds for proving yourself and learning the ropes and what good looks like, I had appetite for starting something and for making my way down to Silicon Valley. When I finally did make the jump from big tech down to a startup, I'd spent some time across the communications landscape. I'd spent some time looking at AI, RPA, robotic process automation technologies, enterprise SaaS during my time in venture capital. Last company we were doing, it was AI ML applied to, I think, voice data in customers and partners. Software that includes folks like Microsoft and Activision Blizzard and Riot Games, Sony and Nintendo and others, and bringing some of that know-how, plus the background across financial services. As an undergrad, I was in finance and MIS and had summers doing everything from equity trading on Wall Street to wealth management. Um, Pulling some of that expertise and realizing there's a massive pain point or a problem statement in the world of wealth management around how you get work done, and the opportunity that generative AI was presenting at the time, and realizing that if we can, offload in the magnitude of 5, 10, maybe even in some cases 15 hours a week, the core responsibilities around agenda building and taking meeting notes that is required by the SEC, and following up with these clients, and syncing all these tasks to your various systems and tools, there was high value to be driven. And then, of course, once you make that impact with the audience of financial advisors that you're serving, that then allows for them to increase their serviceable clients by 20, 30, 40%. And thus, you have more benefit from the mass population who might be interested in financial advice and financial expertise from a wealth manager that they can partner with. So there's sort of the first and the second order effects there that I see us bringing into the world with Focal in particular. But I do recognize that my path is probably not as traditional as others, and really optimizing on discovery and experience, and really finding fulfillment and impact have been themes for me personally over the years.
Yeah, and I mean, I imagine that, the impact is also, as advisors are freed up, as their time is freed up with this tool, they're able to serve more clients, right? And clients with, that, maybe don't have as much money as their other clients, and they can, have a bigger impact in terms of providing financial advice and financial planning to the masses. I don't know, I
That's
guess I just
exactly
see that
right.
as another impact, like.
Yeah, ultimately, Focal, we give the gift of time. So today we're saving financial advisors 8+ hours a week. We have the ability to help them scale their clients they're able to service. And the way that I think about it, we are helping democratize access to personalized financial advice, right? Through generating the financial advisor summaries, the agendas, the tasks, the emails, and automating work across their back office through proactive agentic AI. And that's where I think this whole industry is going to be evolving very rapidly in the next few years here, because the underlying technology capabilities are just so very different in a world where you can not only generate content and provide advice at scale, but you can also action across different systems and tools and automate clicks in a way that really offloads the long tail of core responsibilities that advisors have to manage today. The unfortunate reality is that as an advisor, you have maybe 1/6 of your time that you're spending with clients, and our goal is to double, triple, ultimately increase the amount of time that you can spend with your clients.
Yeah, that's great. I think a lot of us don't have your perspective on life, right? Like, most of us have not had a near death experience. I have not. And so, I know you mentioned travel, and that was one of you had kind of a thirst for seeing the world and getting out there and traveling. And so, how is travel kind of played into your life path and finding happiness, and how has that kind of brought you fulfillment and well-being in your own life?
That's a great question. I think of travel as the eye opener, or the point of realization for a lot of people the first time that they go abroad and see the way that a different culture or a different community operates. And you realize that you have been growing up in a microcosm or a bubble, or that the world at large does in fact have many different operating models. I remember the first time that I had gone abroad to China, And funny enough, I was sick as a dog on the way over and had some bad
Mm.
food in the LA airport. Too much information there for the podcast, Diana. But if anything, that accentuated that experience for me. And I just remember looking out the window and seeing these buildings that were the size of skyscrapers, 80 stories tall in some cases, and then coming to the realization that the infrastructure was just so incredibly structured. Really, from a design standpoint, it's all centrally managed, so you had within 5 minutes of your door everything from the grocery store to the movie theater to your school. But it was a very different way of life, right, than what I
Mm.
had become accustomed to in the United States. And through that experience, you come to realize that a lot of communication, it is both physical and verbal, right? But you can get a lot done pointing to the restroom or the menu with just sheer willpower of physical attribution. The I think other aspect of this is when you do come across just different modes of operating in this world, there is sort of a humbling experience that results of that, right? When you get taken out of your comfort zone and you're forced to face um, ambiguity at some level, it does have you questioning whether it's the way that you've lived or habits that you have or what good looks like in communicating with other people. And it really helps you understand just the breadth and diversity of what this world has to offer. And it can also be challenging too, right? If you go abroad and you've never been before, you have to figure out the logistics and the planning and where are you going to go. And some of these awe-inspiring sites, whether it's the architecture or the nature, can be really, truly just inspiring to the personal psyche. More broadly, I think travel for a lot of people is their first interaction with true hardship. And there's actually a recent interview I saw with Jensen Huang over at NVIDIA where he had wished an entire audience of Stanford students hardship in their life
Mm.
because he believes that it builds character, it empowers a sense of purpose. And I think whether it's travel, whether it's hardship, whether it's any of these sort of life changing experiences that take you out of the norm, I do believe that if you overcome these moments in life or are able to internalize and accept and appreciate them for what they are, it is that Nietzsche saying, right? Of if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Or if you can incorporate into who you are, and this is something that I definitely had to think through from the roller coaster accident, being able to understand the experience that I'd had, but then also move on with what was coming next.
Mm.
Resilience is a core trait of just humanity, and being able to fully embrace that, whether it is through injury, hardship, or travel. I think it's incredibly important and really key to ensuring that the way you're growing is in the directions that you aspire towards.
Yeah, those are some really great points. And I mean, I was just thinking about my own travel and how, learning about different modes, ways of life. When I went to Italy, I could just tell the way people live there is different. And in the US, I just always kind of felt like, and maybe this is a New York thing, but it's just like it's like a kind of a rat race, right? Where you're working, 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 working,
Yeah.
working, and then you die. And in
Hmm.
Italy, it was just like people were living life and, sitting down and having a gelato and not like this whole like rat race, work, 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 work. It was a different way of life. And I kind of, that opened my eyes to that. So I think that's definitely a great point. Do you think your path would have been different if you hadn't been on that roller coaster that day?
I'm going to comment really quick on the European mindset because, and then I'll come back to this.
Yeah.
You're absolutely on point with the lifestyle and the different sort of lived experiences that people abide by and the daily rituals in different countries. I had also lived in Munich for a period of time. And I remember, just to give you a quick example, at lunchtime, which started at noon, um, I would get there, a few minutes early. 11:55, no one shows up. 11:57, one or two people show up. 11:59, everybody starts finally coming down the elevator, and at noon, you have literally 2,000 people in office just lined up, ready for food. But that was a very German approach. Being on time and sort of timeliness more broadly is a priority in that culture. I also recall coffee time in the afternoons being sort of a religious period of time where people would, press pause and enjoy the company of one another and catch up on the kids or, what's happening on the weekend. The sense of work-life balance was
Yeah.
very different in Europe, and thinking through, how do I want to bring that or not, right, into my life. There is a very big difference between how we live our life in America, culturally as well as professionally. And that goes on both the scale of being open around sort of the personal life, but then also the attention to the grind, right? How much time you're putting in and finding balance there, or at least finding your personal sense of balance. If nothing else, at least reflecting and being aware that maybe there needs to be some kind of trade-off or balance to be made, because you only have so much time in the day. And when you think across your identity buckets, whether it's personal, professional, maybe it's health and wellness, maybe you've got kids as a bucket as well, you have to really pour the water that you have into those buckets according to where you want, and ultimately being able to optimize for the right mix across those identity buckets is it's a tough it's a tough calculation to make. But seeing how others do it abroad certainly changed, I think, the way that I thought about fulfillment and work-life balance to some extent. To your question around thinking whether my path would be different if I hadn't been on a roller coaster, I do think that there's a good chance I would have settled for less excitement in my life, perhaps optimized for more stability, had I not been inspired to live with, greater aspirations, and had felt that sort of need, that drive, if you will, the internal motivation to keep going and to really make the most of what I have. I probably would have worked to live a happy 9 to 5 life instead of finding
Yeah.
myself on a more entrepreneurial path that provided that outlet for impact.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the way you describe the way that you talk about things is so eloquent. I guess I'm wondering, do you have any regrets, so far?
That is a exceptional question. Every day is a gift. I certainly make mistakes. I'll happily own up to that. But I aspire to live a life without regrets, and instead
Mm.
choose to view mistakes as learning opportunities. For me, or at least the mindset that I choose to subscribe to, is that being better is a lifetime pursuit.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm afraid we're just about out of time. But I'd like to thank my guest, John Connell, for being on the podcast and sharing his story with me. John, thank you so much. This was just so great to talk to you. And, I'm just kind of soaking up like all of the experience and knowledge that you have. And it's been really great. Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed it, Diana. Thank you for your time.
And if you'd like to reach out to John, if you want to learn more about Focal, definitely check them out. You can email him at info@meetwithfocal.com. You can go to their website, meetwithfocal.com, or check them out on LinkedIn. It's Focal Secure Advisor AI is their LinkedIn account. But if you have a struggle yourself and you wish to share your experiences and help others in similar situations, please feel free to reach out to me at diana.britton@informa.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor. If you've not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This is Diana Britton reminding you that where there's healing, there is hope. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of wealthmanagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your particular situation.